Hi everyone, welcome back to Steve's Garage. In today's video, I'm replacing the thermostat and thermostat housing on a Mark IV 1.8t. In addition to that, I am doing some other coolant work. I'm going to make separate videos for that, so keep an eye out for links here and in the description once those are done and posted. The reason I'm not making them one giant video is because you can do all this separately. It just so happens that I'm doing it all at once because of the age of the car and just being in there and having the time and money to replace it all. My thermostat was actually functioning totally fine. It wasn't stuck open or closed, but I had a coolant drip on the passenger side front of the engine, so that's what cued me in to look a little further. It's impossible to see on the video, but that whole area was really crusty, and my thermostat housing was in fact leaking. It actually wasn't cracked, which is really common for these cars. It was just leaking around the seal. First things first, get under the driver's side of the car and crack open the drain valve on the radiator. When you do that, you want to go back up top and open up the cap to the overflow bottle. That way the air will come in from the top and push everything out. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it's going to save you the giant mess when you remove the hose that goes to the thermostat itself, so it's just a good idea. And while that's draining out, I'm going to go over the tools you need to get this job done. The thermostat housing bolts are 10mm or have an interior portion that's a 5mm Allen. I was able to use a ball end 5mm Allen bit and get in there without having to remove the alternator, which some how-tos state you need to do. You need a ratchet. A universal joint is optional, but probably good to get in there. Extensions, pliers, flathead screwdriver, and a torque wrench. You don't necessarily need the torque wrench, but the thermostat housing bolts do have a torque spec, and I didn't want to over-tighten it and break it, or under-tighten it and then have it leak. So as I said earlier, I'm not going to remove the alternator. I'm going to remove all these vacuum lines here in front of the intake manifold. Start out by taking the two 10mm nuts holding the SAI lines on, then move to the two 10mm bolts holding the bracket to the intake manifold. Once those bolts are out, there are 4 vacuum lines holding this thing to the engine still. 2 on the right side of that plate, 1 by the fuel rail, and then 1 underneath the intake manifold. Once those are disconnected, move on to your N249 valve, which is underneath the plate, unplug it, and then you can take this whole plate and the mess of VGR lines and just put it aside for the time being. As far as the dipstick tube goes, you don't have to remove it. It's not in the way of the thermostat and the housing, but it does help having it out of the way to get your hands and tools in there, and you're better off removing it than possibly breaking it from bumping into it. If you do remove it, just block that hole off so nothing falls in there. I stuffed a towel in there at first, but I actually went back and covered it with a Ziploc bag because I didn't want any coolant to drip in there. At this point, you have clear access to the thermostat housing. You can get in there and look around, see if you can find that leak before you dive into it fully. Additionally, that rusty pipe you see going into the right side of the block there, that's that coolant hard pipe that runs along the front of the engine to the back to the heater hoses and what I'm going to be replacing in the other video. Next, disconnect the upper radiator hose from the thermostat housing. You see me struggling here because I'm using a pair of pliers that are too small for the spring clamp, but it shouldn't be a problem to take it off. There will most likely be coolant in that hose when you pull it off the thermostat housing, so just have that drain pan ready underneath the car. Now you can remove the 2 bolts that are holding the thermostat housing to the engine. Like I mentioned earlier, I used a 10mm with a U-joint and an extension to get them off. I did use that 5mm ball and Allen to put them back in. Either tool will work. That being said, always double check the size of your hardware. I don't know what size you have. I don't know if someone replaced the bolts on your car, so this is what worked on my car. Double check before you buy a new tool for yours. Here's just a quick shot of it off the car. You can see it's real crusty around that edge where the O-ring seals it, so I probably just need a new O-ring to clean that up, but I am replacing the whole thing because they are prone to cracking. Even though this one didn't, I'm not taking any chances putting this old part back on the car. You can see that I struggled a bit with the thermostat. Sometimes you can pull it out by hand. You typically need like a screwdriver or a pick tool to kind of yank it out. You shouldn't need a pry bar, but I'm guessing all that corrosion on there just had it stuck in there extra tight. Just like the thermostat housing, the thermostat itself has not failed. It's not why I'm here today. I'm here because of that leak. But there's no sense in cleaning up old parts and putting them back in if you can afford to replace them with new parts, especially because I have not replaced these parts and I've owned the car for 10 years. So I'm here, I'm solving that leak, I'm going to put all new parts into place. At the end here, you can see how crusty and corroded that O-ring is. That is absolutely what is causing my coolant leak. It's just not creating a seal anymore, and it's allowing coolant to get by. I don't have this on film because there just wasn't enough room to do it, but it's a really good idea to clean that mating surface if you have the same corrosion issues that I ran into here. You want to clean that mating surface along the engine because if not, you're going to have the same sealing problem when you put everything back in. Even if there's not a ton of corrosion, it's just a good idea to make sure that mating surface is clean. If you do have to clean that surface up, make sure you block the hole into the coolant passage because you don't want to introduce any dirt or debris into your cooling system. With the mating surface clean, now you can install the thermostat. There's a bunch of information about how to install the thermostat. The Bentley manual says that it turns and kind of locks into place. People online say that there's like a pin or a weep hole and that has to be installed on the bottom or installed however the other one was installed. Mine didn't have any of that. It doesn't lock into place. It doesn't have a weep hole. It doesn't have a pin. The other one came out kind of like at a 45, so I just installed this one horizontally, and I can honestly say that I have not had any issues with the thermostat functioning. My advice to you is to just install the new one however the old one came out. With the thermostat in place, install your O-ring, and then you can install your thermostat housing. I upgraded to the aluminum style. They say that they're better. They don't crack like the plastic ones. Again, mine wasn't cracked, but I figured I would take this opportunity to upgrade. I bought this one from Euro Tuning. They're honestly probably all from the same manufacturer, so just find whatever website has it cheapest and order it from there, or order that plastic one. If you do order that plastic one, make sure it's an OEM one. I wouldn't want to take a chance on a non-OEM coolant part. I've done that before and they leak. So if you're gonna go the plastic route, order an OEM part. Better safe than sorry. You don't want to have leaks and then do this all over again. As you can see here, and from what I stated earlier, I did use a torque wrench to tighten these bolts down. The Bentley manual states that it's 11 foot-pounds, and while I understand that's not very much, that's why I wanted to use the torque wrench. I didn't want to over-tighten these and strip the bolts out in the block or something like that. I would assume that with the aluminum thermostat housing, you're not going to crack it like you would a plastic one, but I bet if you over-tightened it, it would maybe deform it or warp it a little bit, and then it wouldn't seal properly, and then you're going to have a leak like I'm trying to fix anyway. Go ahead and reattach your upper radiator hose and then reinstall all of those vacuum lines and EGR lines and everything we took off earlier. I don't have footage of that here because I wasn't putting it back together at the time. I was doing a lot of other work. It is just the reverse of removal, so if you do have any questions, just ask, but it's pretty straightforward. I'm not going to go into huge detail about bleeding your cooling system. I assume if you're doing this, you kind of know how to do that. I will sum it up real quick. Open up that overflow bottle, add coolant to the max line, start the car, and just let it idle. Let it idle up to temp. As it's happening, the coolant level is going to go down. Keep adding more. The thermostat's going to open. You're going to have coolant going through that upper radiator hose. It's going to circulate back to the overflow bottle. And once that starts happening, confirm that level of coolant. Then you can close the cap, take it for a drive, see if it lowers again, and add more. That pretty much sums it up. If you do have any questions about that portion, again, leave a comment. Let me know. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those below. I also have a Yodel profile. You can head over there if you want some more in-depth one-on-one time with me. I hope you found this video helpful. Thanks so much for watching.